Alrighty, guys, so we are reading Ever After High, Fairy's Got Talent. There's Rocky. And here we go. Sometime. Hold on. A fairy fitting. It was during early childhood when Fay Belle learned that her wings were all important. Being raised in a fairy household, wings were a constant topic of conversation. The center of style and the object of legends. There were paintings of wings and wings sculptures. Even their mailbox was shaped like a wing. The mailbox stood at the end of the long driveway and read, Thorn Residence. It contained the usual stuff, catalogs, bills, and junk mail. But it also contained handwritten letters, mostly from young fairy boys and girls who hoped to one day meet the mailbox's owner, the Dark Fairy, aka Madame Thorn. However, while the mailbox was stuffed to capacity, there was a certain type of correspondence that never appeared at the Thorns' residence invitations. Whether the event was a wedding, a birthday, or a reunion did not matter. It was a dark fairy's curse to never get invited to things. She went to a great deal of effort spying and eavesdropping for it. Was important that she been seen at the most prestigious event. But if she stumbled upon a party in progress that had enlightened her detectation, she'd go into a rage. It made sense then that it was best to invite the Dark Fairy, so as not to feel her wrath, but whether they intended to invite her or not, everyone forgot to invite her. That was the curse. Invitations were a sensitive subject in Thorn household. A guardhouse stood next to a mailbox with a goblin in attendance. It was his duty to inspect documents and identifications before allowing entrance through the silver gates. One might assume that the Dark Fairy's driveway would lead to an Innery residence, a gargly infested fortress, or a crumbling bat-filled castle, especially because it was located in the dark forest. But the villa at the end of the driveway was an elegant design and built of white stone. Marble steps led to the pair of French doors, flaked on the other side by the tall windows and sparkled in the sunlight. A perfectly manicured lawn, sculpted hedges, and shimmering KOI pod lent an air of sophistication and impeccable taste. The Dark Fairy herself did not look as one might expect either. She did not shroud herself in midnight black or blood red, nor did she wear a mask or a cap. She kept no spiders, snakes, or rats at her beck and call, nor did she slink among shadows. Her floor-to-ceiling portrait graced the wall opposite the main entry in this painting. Her white hair was swept to the side, exposing the long pale neck. Her dress was white silk with pearl buttons, and her heels were formed with elvish crystal. She looked the purest example of courtier elegance, and upon her full hands perched a single ring bearing the Thorn family crest. At first glance, one might think that her lack of embellishment was a sign that she was simple. But the painter had captured the truth in her dark eyes. She was an intelligent, complex being who knew the power of destiny. Behind the portrait, up the windy staircase, third door on the right, was Faribault's childhood room. There was a happy place, cluttered with stuffed animals, building blocks, crayons, and paper, all matter of things to keep Faribault busy. For she had been an active, quick-witted child who hadn't cared for idle time. Her personal understanding of wings occurred 3 days after her 6th birthday, when she was getting dressed in her room. But she was having trouble. "It doesn't fit," she complained, her voice muffled by the pink shirt she was trying to yank over her head. Her chambermaid and mouse-sized fairy named Lucille flew around Faribault's waist, then tugged on the shirt hem. The shirt wouldn't budge. "Your wings are in the way," Lucille declared. "My wings." Faribault took off the shirt, then turned sideways to look in the mirror. Sure enough, while she slept, her baby wings had tripled the size. She nearly bursted with happiness. "They're so pretty! My wings grew, they grew!" Unaccustomed to the new size, she unfurled them without warning, accidentally knocking tiny Lucille across the room. Then Faribault flapped her wings and rose right up to the ceiling. "Whoa! Look what I can do!" After ricocheting off the wall, Lucille landed face first on the stuffed unicorn. She scrambled to her feet and shook a finger at Faribault. "You come down here, this insane young lady." Faribault did, but she flew right back up and down, laughing the whole time. Her baby wings had never lifted her more than a few inches off the ground. "I can't wait to show Mother." "Well, you can't show anyone until you get dressed." Using a miniature pair of scissors, Lucille enlarged the wing holes in Faribault's shirt. "It still doesn't fit perfectly, but at least her wings were comfortable." "Hurry up," Faribault said, wiggling while the chambermaid selected a pair of shoes. "Won't Mother be surprised?" "Madame already knows your wings have grown," Lucille told her. "How does she know?" Faribault had only been out of bed for a short time. "She hasn't yet seen Mother." "Because the entire household can hear you shouting," Lucille told her. "You shouldn't shout." "But my wings grew." While Faribault danced around the room, Lucille flew after her, doing her best to brush Faribault's messy white blonde hair. "Dear, oh dear, you are a handful." She zipped around Faribault's head, trying to get the locks settle into place. But each time she'd smooth this section of hair, Faribault would spin around and mess the whole thing up. With an expected sigh, Lucille pushed Faribault towards the door. "Out you go." Then she escorted Faribault downstairs, through the grand entry, and onto the circular driveway, where the Thorne family's driver was waiting by the black stretched limousine. Its hood ornament was a pair of wings. "Good morning, Miss Thorne," he said with a tip of his cap. His wings were as black as his suit, but the tips looked as if they'd been dipped into liquid silver. He opened the limo's back door. "Are you ready for an adventure? Are we going anywhere?" "Aren't we flying?" Faribault asked. "I can fly high now. My wings grew. Want to see?" She lifted off the ground higher than she expected. The sensation startled her, and she squealed with alarm. The driver reached up and gently grabbed her ankle. "I'm impressed," he told her, as he pulled her back to the ground. "But we won't be flying today, because the weather is questionable. We wouldn't want you to get your new wings to get caught up in a rainstorm." "Where are we going?" Faribault asked. "That is a surprise," Lucille told her. She gently pushed Faribault into the limousine's back seat. but she didn't join her. "Aren't you coming with me?" Fabel asked. Lucille hovered outside the car door, her minuscule wings beating the air. "Madam will accompany you today," she said. Fabel gasped. Whatever they were doing, it had to be super important if her mother was coming along. No suitcases had been packed, so they must not be going far. But the dark fairy rarely went on errands, and Fabel hadn't been told to dress up for one of those parties where they always show up uninvited. She squirmed, watching out the window for her mother to appear. A few minutes later, the dark fairy flew out the villa. She wore an elegant silver suit. Her white hair was tucked beneath the pillbox hat. "Hello, darling," she said as she slid into the limousine and settled next to her daughter. "Mother!" Fabel wrapped her arms around the dark fairy and took a deep breath. The delicate scent of roses wafted from the nape of her mother's neck. It was a well-chosen scent, for though the rose smells sweet, they also have thorns. The driver closed the door. Lucille waved goodbye as the limousine made its way down the long driveway. Fabel stopped, hugging her mother, then pressed her face against the limousine window. "Where are we going?" she asked. She waved to the goblin's guards as he opened the gate. "Your wings have begun to grow," the dark fairy said with a proud glint in her eye, "and they will keep growing until you reach adulthood. Therefore, the time has come for you to meet my tailor. From this moment forth, he will customize all your clothing and to fit your wings perfectly." "New clothes?" Fabel scowled. "That didn't sound like an adventure. Couldn't we go to the beast garden or go get rainbow cones?" Madame Thorne took her daughter's hand and stared into her equally dark, equally complex eyes. "This is important," she said. "Trust me." The journey of Fairy Town took an hour, during which Fabel wiggled and squirmed like a competitive caterpillar in a jar. But finally, the colorful buildings rose into view. The driver turned down Main Street, passing shops and cafes. Sidewalks bustled, and both with winged and non-winged individuals. Some carried packages, some walked dogs, others gazed at the window displays. Because of the large fairy population, there are additional traffic in the air and extra seating on the roofs for those who wanted to sip nectar with the breathtaking air. The limousine pulled to the curb and stopped. When the driver opened the back door, Fabel darted out and stood on the sidewalk. No one paid much attention to her. A pair of fairies flew around her. A man with a phalanx in his shoulders didn't even bat an eye. The lady nearly bumped into Fabel with her baby carriage. "Am I invisible?" Fabel thought. "Don't they see that my wings grew?" She flicked them once, twice. "Look at me!" Suddenly everyone stopped walking, stopped talking, and all the eyes turned and stared. But they were looking at Fabel's wings. The dark fairy had emerged from the limousine. Her height was impressive, even more so in her crystal silhouettes. She smoothed the wrinkles from her skirt and made sure that her hat was perfectly in place. Then, with her chin high, she unfurling her wings and collected filled the street. They were maleficent wings, powerful and delicate at the same time, as translucent as glass, but with black edging, as if they'd been drawn in the air from a marker. For a moment, the rain clouds parted. The dark fairy turned slightly, allowing her wings to catch the sunlight. The rainbow fell across the limousine. "Ah," the crowd said. Those standing closest bowed her head. "Madam," they whispered. Then the dark fairy bent down and whispered in her daughter's ear, "Follow me. Hold your head high, and do not make eye contact with anybody." Let them stare at you. Let them admire you. The gawkers stepped back as the dark fairy wings began to flap. She rose a few inches off the ground and then flew toward the shop. Fabelle followed. She did her best not to look at anyone, but there was so much to see. There are leprechauns with mohawks, and a lady with goat ears, and a phoenix was adorable. The dark fairy stopped outside the shop. A sign hung above the door. Fairy fashion and finery. The driver hurried forward and opened the shop's door. But that exact moment, another fairy exited the shop. She was roundish in shape, wearing a simple cotton dress and casual shoes. Her blue hair was up in a bun. Her wings were blue at the tips, but they were folded. She chosen to walk out of the shop. "Oh, pardon me," she said with a little gasp, her hand flying to her chest as she nearly bumped into a dark fairy. Then she curtsied as an honor to see you again, madam. The dark fairy said nothing, but her gaze could have melted stone. The blue-haired fairy stepped aside, making room as the dark fairy flew into the store. Fabelle then noticed a little girl who was holding the fairy's hand. The girl also had blue hair. Their eyes met. The little girl smiled. Fabelle smiled back. They were the same height, maybe even the same age. "My wings grew," Fabelle told her. The blue-haired girl nodded. "Mine did too." "Fabelle," the dark fairy called sternly. Fabelle darted inside. The fairy fashion and finer store was warm and quiet. There were no other customers, just a man with a pointed silver beard who'd been writing in a ledger. But when he turned around and saw the dark fairy hovering in his shop, he dropped his feather pen. Then he bowed. "Madam, to what do we owe you to unexpected pleasure?" His hands began to tremble. "It is time for my daughter's first fitting," the dark fairy told him. She flew the leather chair, then sat. She folded her hands on her lap. "Well," she asked with a hint of irritation. Yes, of course." The tailor grabbed a measuring tape. The daughter of Madame Thorne is always welcome to my humble shop. It is an honor to serve you." He didn't look honored. His legs shook and his face had gone a bit blotchy. As his fingers fumbled, he dropped the tape. "I do apologize for my clumsiness," he mumbled. Fabelle didn't like having to stand perfectly still to be measured. She didn't much care about the fabric or the type of thread or whatever button zippers were selected. However, she did enjoy all the attention she was getting from the townsfolk outside. The windows whispering and watching and proceeding. For a moment, Fabelle felt famous, but then she wondered what was the blue-haired girl going to do next. Would she visit the Beast's garden or get a rainbow cone? "Her new garments will be ready tomorrow. Shall I have them delivered?" the tailor asked. "Of course," the dark fairy said. Then she waved her hand and puff, the fairy dust appeared. The 3 gold coins soared through the air and landed on the tailor's counter. "Good day." The tailor hurried to the door, opened it, then bowed as she flew past. "Thank you for your pardon, age, madam," he said. The crowd parted as the dark fairy and her daughter flew back to the limousine. Some bowed, some curtsied, while others dropped their knees. "Who was that fairy with the blue hair?" Fabelle asked once they were driving back up to Main Street. "Her name was Miss Good Fairy, and she is no importance," the dark fairy replied. This didn't make any sense to Fabelle, but she's a fairy. "You told me that fairies are the most important things." The dark fairy gently pushed the loose strand of her hair with Fabelle's forehead. "Yes, it is true that fairies are extra special because fairies are made of magic. The fairies with the blue hair is fairy godmother. She has limited abilities, but we are darling daughters of our dark fairies, and we wield unlimited powers, which is why we are the most admired and most feared." Feared, Fabelle realized the look she'd seen on the tailor's eyes, and in everyone's eyes when they looking at her mother. It has been a fear. Why are we feared? Because, my dear, while fairy godmothers are servants to their magic, we dark fairies serve no one. And that was one day when Fabel Thorn learned exactly who she was and who she expected to become. And that is the end of part 2.